When people say, oh, I can't wait to do VR cinema. I'm like, yeah, but that's inherently more lean forward. Even if it's just a story, the act of doing this, turning your head and looking around is taxing. And we're lazy. The reason we're not going to get the keyboards in Minority Report is because no one wants to pick up their arms. Like, no, we're going to use a mouse.
Yeah.
First of all, a woman going into video games already is pretty unusual. I know that there's a lot of literature out there and stuff around.
Is that unusual?
It's
getting less unusual.
But
yeah,
it was.
I mean, do you have to have a brother who was younger than you that you're always playing with every day in order to get yourself into being into video games?
I did.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
A little bit about my history. So, did not think I was going into the games, got a fine arts degree, and then decided to for grad school to go back for games. And I was hired to work in the game innovation lab. Their whole goal is to do things outside of the norm of gaming. It's not focused entirely on entertainment, it's focused on education, understanding. One of the games that also came out of there is Walden, which is an adaptation of Henry David Thoreau's Walden, of the same thing. And it's about trying to experience Walden the way he did. You go and you build the cabin, you live as Thoreau did during those times, and you interact with his reading that way, which is a much more interactive way and a much more accessible way for, I think, students to start engaging with it.
Working with fabric, is a very tactile, thing, big fabric spaces. How do you take that skill and bring it into gaming? Because it's just such that's me walking around inside fabric trying to experience that to an online thing. How do those two things work together?
So yeah, my background was in painting, but I ended up doing a lot of installation work, and I started working.
Clarification.
Yeah, no worries. I'm following.
What?
And so,
Priscilla, why are you looking like that?
Well, because we're talking about video games now. We're talking about fabric. So
we're talking about our work. What are you talking about?
No,
we want everyone to understand.
I'm following. I'll get you. And so for me, I had a big hesitation. I think my work has always been incredibly physical. I, had a traumatic experience in my undergrad where I was like, I want to create beautiful, wonderful things. I want people to go in and access them. I want them to play. I feel like even when we go to a gallery today, and if it's an installation piece, we're still like, do not touch the installation piece in an art gallery. And I very much wanted to create things which my artist statement has always been, if I can evoke in adults what a McDonald's play place evokes in kids, then I have succeeded. And so for me, switching over to video games I don't see a difference because I still ended up making a lot of physical things. I think an understanding a space and how people move through a space is core for video games, much more than, any other medium, because people are, we're used to storytelling being in a box, but when the player can wander, building a space becomes much more important, which I do think ties into installation work. But in my own artistic practice, I've actually made a point of creating digital and physical combinations. So I've done a little work in augmented reality. I've done some work in virtual reality, but building physical sets. And then I've done a lot in microcomputing. So taking very tiny, essentially computers and wiring lights and switches so that they react and essentially do unexpected reactions in actual physical objects.
When you a lot of people look at Call of Duty or Halo and they say, this is bad, right? But there's something really beautiful about the way they work, the way they keep engaging a person to participate. How do you, would you call that the game mechanic? What do you call that thing that brings people back all the time, to the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things, to call it, but I think it's about flow and the game feel as opposed to say mechanics. I would say mechanics are you shoot, you get points, you level up. But what makes those franchises so successful and so fun and so replayable is that they feel good. And I'm not just talking oh yeah, murder feels good. I think that's a very reductivist take on it. That's no different than reading an action book or watching an action movie. I think what makes these games fun is that people have really considered, okay, like, how is a screen shake going to feel? How is it going to, like, how is the UI to switch, between different guns going to feel? All these elements that keep you in the heart of the action, that make you feel empowered, that make you feel cool, that have like special effects that create unique scenarios to make that gameplay renewable and interesting. And at the end of the day, not to throw around a very, nebulous term, but that immersion, I think, is what makes those games very popular, very fun. And also, like, the narrative feel of it. I think when we think about video games, especially from an outsider's perspective, we tend to dismiss the storyline and the idea that it's you in control of it, and how wonderful and exciting that feels. And so, no hate for any popular action game these days, because they're made by brilliant teams who have refined these feelings down to a science, where they can really like start to think about like how is every moment gonna like improve the player's experience.
So let's say that you're going to think of a new game.
Okay.
Do you have to think of all new stuff, or can you take a game engine and say, well, we'll use this game engine, use this piece, and use that? Like, what's a one-line sentence that would be a premise for a game?
Ooh, a one-line sentence. I would first of all, to kind of jump in, I do think absolutely take from all other things. I think, say there's no new ideas under the sun is, I think, reductivist, but I do think it's very important to like see what you like and make a twist on it. So many great games come from homages, or like a fan being like, I really like this, let's make that. I think one of the great examples is Portal, which started off as a mod. I actually give a lecture to my students about the modding community, and essentially like the idea that when we play a game and we can't do something in the game, it's an idea for how to make a next one. Like I say, there's desire paths throughout life, and when you're playing a game and you want to go do something and you can't do it, all of a sudden there's an opportunity there that says, hey, if you want to do that, someone else wants to do it as well. And so like, oh, I want to do Tetris, but I want to be able to rotate, the blocks and see it from a different perspective, or I want it to like flatten into 2D, or well, Tetris is already 2D, it's like 3D
right.
Tetris. I don't know what that means. It sounds like a headache to code, but it's probably something.
But with Portal, is it that it's a puzzle that you're moving around the puzzle? Like, is that the idea that you go, oh, okay, we can start with this?
What happened? I don't think it started off as let's make a puzzle game. I think the person who was doing it was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a gun that I could like shoot on one wall here, shoot another wall there, and it would connect me between the two.
Right.
And then once they did that, they were like, oh, and through that play, through that like building of that tool, you then begin to design puzzles. You then begin to see the potential. And then once you start to see the potential, someone comes along and adds in a story, and then that becomes, it's a whole new game.
Do you ever think about, okay, you were talking about the empowerment of, Call of Duty and some of these other things. Do you also ever just back into an emotional state where you might want to achieve, which is like the Walden thing to me sounds more appealing, right? I'm not interested in what it feels like.
Well, you're not going to play a first-person shooter, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not going to, but and I never thought there was a place for me to play a game. But I guess the question is,
have you tried?
I have tried with my son.
Yeah.
Hold on. But if there was a game that, I could be riding horses across, and jumping across the, I don't know.
There's a lot of those. World of Warcraft,
Yeah, but actually
not in that context. I don't want to
you
go.
You could be an orc in World of Warcraft.
I don't want to go to the Warcraft place. Are there? Yeah, I'm just asking Martzi, not you, Jesse. Whether you think that there is, are people designing for a different consumer, I guess, now, and who's doing that?
There are trillions more Candy Crush players than there ever was at Fortnite. And I think,
but there's also just games that are super beautiful where you're just working through beautiful landscapes that there is entertainment to the games that isn't, a lot of people, I know with my son, he didn't want to, like when Avatar came out, he just could care less because he could be in Avatar. He'd rather be in it than watch it. You know what I mean?
I know, but I want to know what Martzi has to say.
Okay.
No. Yeah, there are those games. And I think history-wise, games have absolutely been marketed towards a like specific demographic. Like, and one of the things they said was like, there was the boys aisle and the girls aisle, and they're, video game consoles came around and they were like, boys. And it was mostly primarily marketed to them. But these days, that's not the case. And in fact, a large percent of like the mobile market, which is huge, is geared towards women. I'm a passionate, enthusiastic mobile gamer. And I think in America or in the West specifically, there's kind of a stigma around mobile gaming. It's not traditional, it's not proper, it's not a console, or it's like, but in a lot of other countries where mobile is like the primary device a lot of people have, there's less of that stigma. So it's much more everyone is gaming. And the specific games you're talking about, like one of my favorite games is essentially like a Pride and Prejudice game. Where it's like open world. I love visual novels, and there's great exploration games, sometimes with really like weighty material. I think What Remains of Edith Finch is about like, understanding a family's history, really heavy games, That Dragon Cancer, which is based on a true story of a family dealing with their child having cancer. There's tons of games where, dexterity or shooting or jumping is not the main mechanic. It's more decision making or more exploration. And those games are continually coming up more and more. I think Journey is one of the ones that back in like 2015 that kind of opened up like the larger idea of like, gaming to a game where it's just about helping each other and like exploring a pace and like moving forwards towards a destination. We don't hear about those games as much, especially like but I'm swimming in those games because like I work at a university, I just talk to students all day. That's all I ever see. But when I talk to my parents or other things, I think, we forget that they're prevalent and they're out there, and that, lots of people, gaming is for everyone. And then there is probably a thing out there that would make you happy. And I think things like
I don't know about that.
I think mobile or even VR. I bought a virtual reality headset for my parents for Christmas. And, I got it for my dad because I was like, oh, we can go bowling. But then my mom calls me up and she goes, oh, I've been using Tai Chi on the app. It's great. I was like, okay. I think that it's a more open field than I think we even realize.
So, let's say that you have a student and they have an idea for a game, or you just in a game company and everybody agrees, yeah, this is a great idea. What is the first stage of creating a game?
The first stage of creating a game, hopefully, is some type of prototyping. What we tell our students is generally like paper prototype it. And, we've had people who've gone out on like built field games to understand the mechanics of maybe a multiplayer scene. We say software is intensive. The cheapest, quickest possible way you can test a concept, that's how you should do it at the start. And
so is that you put it on index cards and you bring in 10 people and you sit around in a room, or you put it on the wall? Like, what's that like?
Absolutely, just that. Come brainstorm, make a prototype, test the prototype, play it yourselves, fix it, modify it. Once you've got something that's kind of working, kind of pull in outside people. Because the nature of interactive design is that if it's just you and you think, this is great, chances are you've missed a lot of things. Chances are you only think one way. Right. And you have to pull other people in, because designing a game, for one, is you can do that. But generally, we want people to interact with it, and understanding how multiple people interact is key to this. And so we tell our students, the first thing a lot of our students want to do is just open up and start coding. It's like, you can do that, but if that mistake is going to be more costly if it doesn't work than if you try it on paper first.
So, a person who uses a game like Priscilla has one-way path through. Do you think like, oh, okay, in order for this to be successful, there's got to be 3 or 4 paths, and how would you define the paths through the game?
So you're starting to get into what is a game, which is a dangerous field. Right. I think, there are interactive stories where, it is the same, it is the story doesn't change. And, you may click on different things, you may click on them in a slightly different order, but nothing you do will affect the end state or anything else in that. But it is interactive. Whether you want to call that a game or not, I don't care. Right. If my student wants to make that, that's great. If my student wants to make something that has branching past and a level of interactivity, that's also great. I
Mhm.
do think in both you have to consider the user and the interaction, which is like more what I want to, if I'm dealing with that, that's more what I'm passionate about teaching and making sure they do that effectively and with like, and thoughtfully. So I like branching narratives. I like paths. I like feeling a little bit of empowerment in my things, even if it's minor. And I think there are ways to tell a singular story, but have a player feel like they have agency.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
Agency being choice.
Yes.
well, it's also interesting hearing you talk about it because the way you sort of described, it's like a writer's room sitting around and you're breaking story really in the end, right? So it's the next, and the coding of it and the execution of it. Okay, that's, you leave that, there's that, you have to figure that part of it out. But really, what is the experience that we want to, or that we want to go after? It's really the experience. And my question is, do you think that, that gaming really is the next evolution beyond film and television? Is that do you think of it that way? I mean, you're at USC, which has really arguably like the best cinema school.
I
Okay,
went to
Skillet.
NYU.
All right, NYU, whatever. There's a group of the top, whatever. But I mean, but the point is
Okay, I only went for 2 years, but I did go.
I know, exactly. The proud dropout here. But I mean, I think the question is, it's really, you're telling a story in the end, right? And what is that relationship between, is development of a game a singular, is it a person by themselves, or is it really that community? A good TV show, you got like a lot of writers in there. Film, it's 100 people, maybe 1,000 people working on a film. How is it as a group to create something?
So let me just tackle the first thing, which is, do I see it replacing traditional media? Which is no. I think when I discuss this, I talk about lean forward, lean back. And there are times when you don't want to play a game because it is inherently more lean forward of an experience than watching a movie or reading a book, even, because you're actively having to engage with it and make these choices. And like we discussed, like choice fatigue, like that's why that's why someone else picks up the president's suit. It's at a certain point, like at the end of how much you want to do that, it's taxing. And so do I think that traditional medium is going to continue to have to share that time slot, or in everyone's life with other now competing media? Absolutely. But when people say, oh, I can't wait to do VR cinema, I'm like, yeah, but that's inherently more lean forward. Even if it's just a story, the act of doing this, turning your head and looking around, right, is taxing. And we're lazy. The reason we're not going to get the keyboards in Minority Report is because no one wants to pick up their arms. Like, no, we're going to use a mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I do think there's places for both. And as for the second part, how big or how small something is, I would say it's very similar to film. You can film a movie by yourself. You can make a game by yourself, and you can make a good film or game by yourself. Is it hard? Oh my gosh, yes. Should it be? Is it generally done better with more people? Absolutely. There's tons of solo devs out there, and they make great work. But they will sometimes, every so often, like, oh, well, I had a composer. Or, oh, well, I did this. I've made games with 3 people, and I'm very proud of them. But I've also, like working on a larger team, pulling in more people, the ability to just, see the amount of like exponential like value increase in a large team, if done correctly, is just the same as a movie. It can be incredible. And I would say those cycles on a film and on a game can be very similar. Sometimes games can even be very large teams and take up to five for like long time to come out. Yeah. You look at Duke Nukem, it can take a real long time.
Now, Martzi, you talk about the phone, right? You can talk about the computer, you talk about a set box. So much of the world seems to be pushing forward towards this, call it the simulation, where people are gonna be online. They're gonna, they might get something, they take a picture online, they put it on their Instagram, it's also on their LinkedIn, and then they push it over to their Facebook group, and there's this interlocking thing of all these different things. Do you think that that is going to change the way we think about games or what's possible? Because a lot more complexity is possible.
I think that's a really interesting question. I think there's two different kind of answers there. It's like, one, when we look at like medium like movies or video games or even TV shows, there's an element of escapism where we don't tie our lives into it. It's a break. And so I think, and then there's games that like are like, tweet this, like, there's like literally options to like, tweet what level you're at or like share your, and so I think their games are trying to engage with that, like tie us into your life. And then we look at streamers and all this stuff, like how we, performative play and all of this. I think there's a push towards that. But when we're in the magic circle, how often do we want to be reminded of it, of the outside world, and vice versa? And so I think do I think it's possible to bridge it? Absolutely. Currently, I don't think anyone's doing it successfully, fully. And I stand to be wrong on this. I think we do talk about and tweet about games, but when we were actively playing games and using that social connection, it's not common. I do think there's like possibilities to do that. And I do think that's one of the best places for augmented reality, which is very difficult to design for game-wise. But we've looked at games like Niantic's Pokemon Go, which I think is one of the most successful examples of augmented reality gameplay. I think we start to bridge it there the most, because like they're having meetups, they're meeting in physical space, they're sharing, there's an inherent nature to like interconnect more. And because they're going out into physical locations, I think there's a lot of play there. And I think it's a very interesting field. I think it's like definitely, I think you're right. I think it will head there. But how we do it and how we disentangle life from play, which will be interesting.
Augmented reality, so far it hasn't really, it's not like it's in 100 games, right? Do you think that's something, and I think that your field of interest is the way things interact in real life. So do you think that this will be a part of it, that sort of discovering things in the real world will have an application in gaming?
Yes, I think, again, I think it's easier to look at things on screens. I think it's easier to look at things in a box. I think, augmented reality is physical. It's more lean forward once again. So do I think this is going to be adapted as our standard, like, this is the future, everyone's going to be doing this? Maybe not, but do I think it's going to be a thing that we do and continue to do, and that field will expand out? Absolutely. I think that there's so much cool things you can do. And I think the term Internet of Things, which is like, let's put, Bluetooth and toasters.
Right.
No, there literally are app connected Bluetooth toasters out there. And we laugh at it because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
it's a lot of work, for you to tell you when your bread's done.
Why do I need a toaster? But if all of a sudden I'm playing a game and like my toaster goes off, like because it's interconnected, I think there's some really cool potential things there. And so, it starts with like, does the hue lights, the, app controlled lights in your apartment like flash when you get shot on screen? That's cool, know, and then we can expand out from there. I think the more connected devices we have, the more we can start pulling gameplay into the real world. But it's, it's difficult, it's tricksy. No one wants to share their APIs, so like building that is very hard. But I do believe that, the more interconnected those things become, the more potential is there. So we'll see if that happens. But I think it's a very cool field.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a not interesting question, because you're really talking about entertainment. But when you think about how to use like the augmented reality, for sort of more serious purpose. So I know there was a while back, Jesse, I think they were trying to deal with, people in a Syrian refugee camp and using augmented reality as a way to kind of really use it for the other, to use it for empathy or to create shared experience, so we can all, do you think about that? Are any of the students thinking about how to use some of this, these incredible tools to really figure out, a more, pro-social or social justice, twist, and what's going on with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll call out a organization called Games for Change, which has like, a festival every year, which celebrates and awards games that essentially do what you're describing here. I think there's a little pushback, especially in the AR VR world, of like empathy generators, where it's like, here, put on like an incredibly expensive headset, feel poor. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's a danger there about, I think missing the mark. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I do believe these can be powerful tools to highlight and motivate change. I think informing is getting information out, like understanding how a system can be imbalanced, are all, especially in terms of system design, is all stuff that games are very well suited towards. But at a certain point, I'm always wary of someone who's like, we're going to solve this through gaming,
Right.
would be anything else. And then the other half of it being, like I commented with the headset, like, we talk about accessibility, and Walden's a great game and it's powerful, but it doesn't run on the majority of Chromebooks, which are what
Right.
the majority of students
Right.
in America. They don't have, and so to Tracy's credit, she's got a grant, and she's working on adapting a version so that it does. But I think, technology is expensive. And so in the hands of the people who have that technology, you can do a lot to inform and motivate and like give direct calls for action. But in terms of using technology to assist, you need to get, what you need to work in what people have access to. And so I think that's when I talk to my students, they're like, I'm gonna make this, VR game that's gonna like educate and all this. I'm like, okay, but who has a headset? And it's
But also, don't you have to start with that same process you described on paper before you even get to how you generate the empathy?
Yeah, exactly. And you like, and there's ways to test it, like, okay, do you have an NPC? Have a person act it out, like, test it out that way, which is an important thing to consider. And then once again, mobile, almost everyone, lots of people have a mobile phone. And so once again, like, I think that stigma of like, mobile gaming, it can be incredibly impactful too, because it's in the hands of so many people.
What does your brother do?
My brother is so cool. I could spend the rest of the time talking about how great my brother is. My brother, Will Campos, is a screenwriter. He is a podcaster. So he plays a tabletop role-playing game that has actually a big following called Dungeons and Daddies, which is about he and his friends play dads from our world who have fallen into the Forgotten Realms, which is the world in D&D, and are trying to rescue their sons and get out.
So is he still, because you guys have been playing video games do you ever get together and play video games now?
Yes, no, every so often I'll go. He's also in Los Angeles, so I mean, yeah, and it's so funny because he wrote a show called Video Game High School, which is on Netflix now. He's the one who got me, I would say, into gaming. Like, and we. So
does he know what you do now? Is he surprised by it?
I think I think our parents are probably more surprised, because if you would ask them which of your children's going to go into video games, they would not have picked me, probably.
Right.
I've actually been lucky enough to get my brother to do writing for one of my video games, and we're actually working on another one together.
Right.
So, yeah, we're not only do we play video games together, but we're developing video games together, which is so cool.
Is he your older brother?
Younger.
Younger. Okay, that's
what
cool.
What moment did it go from playing games together to making games?
It's funny because it didn't start until grad school, in terms of, I mean, well, okay, let me
but when
we were playing games before we were making games, before we were playing, like, when we were my brother and I were exceptionally close as kids. Like, the age gap is very small, and we discovered very easily that Ninja Turtles fit perfectly on top of My Little Ponies, and we're like, well, clearly this was designed this way. So I think
when you heard the voice go to grad school, was it his voice?
No, weirdly, though, he has credit for it, because it was when I moved out, I graduated and moved in with my brother in Los Angeles, because I was like, I don't want to live with my parents. So he was finishing up his time at USC for undergrad, and he was playing Dungeons and Dragons. He introduced me to his group, and I met a girl there who was in the grad program. And honestly, what attracted me to the grad program initially was she described theme park design. And that sort of physical interaction, which me doing installation work, I was like, oh, and I've been continually playing games. I've been playing role-playing games. I've got like my D20 earrings on right now.
Right.
And so, you know, I think, and my brother was like very focused on screenwriting at that point.
Right.
And so initially what had pulled me back into grad school was the idea of like physical locations. But then once I was there, I was like, well, anyone can make a game. Why did no one tell me? and then I started that, and I made a game with a colleague of mine. My brother liked it, and we were like, get in, come on, do the writing for the next one, because, you know, I'm an artist, my friend's a programmer. We did the writing between us, but we could get a real writer. And then all of a sudden it took the next game in the series to like a whole new level, and we're hopefully getting started on the third in the series.
I have a question that everyone wants to know about haunted radio. What is haunted radio?
Okay, so how convenient. I have it here with me. So this is Claxo. This is the Claxo radio hour. And I'll start off with saying that I really like the Halloween section at Target. And so I had done a lot of physical computing at that point. And so that means like basically, you know, little microcontrollers, building and tearing apart things. And so when I was at the Halloween section at Target, I was looking at these Halloween props, and I was like, could I do something with this? Could I, you know, take the guts out and turn it into something else? And so I saw...
Take it out, take the guts out, and then put it back in the store without telling anybody?
That's the next step. That's the next step. Sure, do some drop lifting.
Yeah.
But I bought the radio, and it played a bunch of little jingles when you turn the dial, and that was it. And I brought it into work and annoyed my coworkers. And then we were all looking at it. They're like, why'd you do this? And then I was driving home, and it came to me in a flash, and I called my friend immediately. And I was like, it's an interactive radio drama, you know, where you solve a mystery. That's what this radio is. And he was like, and to his credit, like he immediately was like, okay, let's build it. And so we sat down, we wrote an interactive radio drama where you make choices for the lady detective through the dial. So just, you know, snapping the dial left and right. And this lights up. I think it went to sleep for a little bit, but and basically it's an entirely audio-based game. And you find out why you can not only, you know, who done it of it all, but why this radio is talking to you in the first place. You know, spoiler alert, it might be demonically possessed. So, and then we've actually had great success showing it to the point where we made an app so that you could actually just play it on your phone since the radio is a bit one of a kind.
Nice.
All right. So yeah, that's the Claxo radio hour. And it was...
How do we find it? Like if the audience wanted, how do we...
Yeah, just Google KLAXO on app or Android Play, and you can you know, play it on an app, and that's the entire radio dramas there. Or if you really want, you can contact Jesse and I guess we could build you a radio. There was a Kickstarter for IndieCade, which is an independent games festival. And one of the top tier rewards was a radio. So we do owe a couple people two new radios. So those will be out in existence at some point. Oh, nice. Here it's lighting up again.
Nice.
Amazing.
Wonderful. Well, Martzi, thank you very much. You know, really appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, no, this was a blast. Thank you for having me.